So the story of resurrection began early in the morning, the scripture says. While it was still dark, Mary Magdalene got an early start to her day. Perhaps she wanted to go and get her work done and over with, or maybe she was worried about caring for this man that she loved so deeply, and she didn't want to wait any longer. Perhaps it was the rumors that were going around. Rumors that someone was planning to steal the body of Jesus. Now there were guards at the tomb, just in case someone was trying to do that so they could prevent it, but it was still worrisome. And then when Mary arrives, she sees that the stone that should be covering the tomb has been moved already. And the body is gone. Is this some kind of joke? And so she runs to tell the guys, they took him. And then we get a foot race. Peter and John run to the tomb. Now, the scripture doesn't name John. But John, the author of this gospel, refers to himself in the way that the second sibling might in a family. I'm the favorite, right? Or the older sibling might say, I'm the favorite. I'm mom's favorite. John says, I'm the disciple whom Jesus loved. And of course, this disciple wins the foot race. So he gets there first. He sees the burial clothes, but he won't go in. Is he afraid? Is he in shock? He doesn't go in, but Peter does. He sees the clothes, he sees the cloth that covers Jesus' face. They're lying there, the clothes in one place, the face cloth folded up and placed in another place. This is not the work of tomb raiders. People taking a body wouldn't fold the face cloth and lay it nicely on the bench. They wouldn't care about that, or they would have taken it with them as a souvenir. They wouldn't have left anything behind. Something else must be going on. So Scripture says that at this point, they saw and they believed. Well, what did they believe? That the body was gone? Did they not believe the women when they came? Well, I imagine that as Peter heard this news, he did not want to mess up again, because Peter was still reeling from Jesus' death. And he was still in shock about the crucifixion. And to top it off, I'm sure he was feeling more than a bit guilty about denying that he knew Jesus when he was asked about it. Peter had let Jesus down. And he wasn't about to let that happen again. He would do anything to keep that from happening again. Then it happens again. The body's gone. And Peter didn't prevent that. He couldn't even do that right. So they go home, sure that there's no reason for hope, no idea what to do next, no plan for tomorrow. What are they going to do? Mary stays behind. She just wants to be close to the last place that she knew where Jesus was. She just wants to grieve. But she can't go to the body, and she can't go and be next to him, and she can't care for the body the way she wants to. She can't put the oils on it. She can't care for him in death, and she's desperate to do this. And so she stays behind. And then Jesus shows up. He just shows up. Mary doesn't recognize him. Maybe it's the grief. Maybe it's that she wasn't expecting Jesus to show up, but she doesn't recognize him. She sees a gardener. Come on, Mary, right? It's Jesus here. Don't you see? You don't have any reason to cry. Because it's Jesus. Because he's right there in front of you. It's not a joke, and he's not the gardener. He's right there. Jesus calls out to her again, and it takes a couple of times for her to hear his voice, but she finally does. She hears her own name, Mary. Teacher, she says. She sees him. And Jesus immediately tells her that it's time to go. Go and tell the others. Go tell them that you've seen me and that I'm going to God soon. Go. This is a story that never changes. It's the same story that we retell every Easter. The empty tomb, Jesus gone, Mary and the disciples in disbelief, them believing that the worst has happened, a world is shattered again. And they still don't know what it means. But we do. We do, because we have been living this story all our lives. We have been living the story of the resurrected Christ. And yet we forget. We forget that God always has the last word. That God isn't defeated by death. That God defeats death. Folds up the cloth. Lays it on the bench. As if it's all in a day's work. And it is. And it is still today. Because God is still at work today. God is still at work in our lives. When it seems like there is no reason to hang on to hope, God has the last word. When it seems like life is falling apart and we don't know what to do, God has the last word. When there isn't enough left for us to give, God has the last word. When it seems like there isn't a possible way forward, God shows up as the last word. This is what the disciples were experiencing. They didn't know what they were supposed to do now. Their lives were turned upside down. They didn't have a leader. They didn't have a direction. They didn't have a plan. And yet, in the midst of that despair, Jesus shows up as a gardener, as one who cultivates life. As one who cares for that which is alive. And that happens for us too. When things are going great, God shows up, right? When things are running smoothly and it seems like we have it all together, God shows up. We might expect that. But when things are all kinds of wrong, God shows up then too. God shows up when all hope is lost. God shows up when we can hardly remember to breathe. God shows up when we don't know what to do tomorrow or even today or even in the next minute. God shows up. When life seems to be over, God brings life. God shows up. And God brings the last word to our every situation. God brings the last word when we see no way out. God brings the last word when it looks like life is over, and that last word is hope. Hope because of the resurrection. I promise, says God. I promise that when you don't see hope, hope is here. When you don't see a future, the future is mine. When you need someone that has your back, I'm that person. I promise. And the proof of my promise is an empty tomb. Resurrection. It's a story that we've heard before. It's a story that we will need to hear again. And God will tell us whenever we need to hear it. The reminder of the promise of resurrection. God will show up. He'll call our name. He'll cultivate life. We may not know that God is speaking to us or working in our lives in that way. It may take a few times, but God will show up. God will speak to us. God will remind us of the promise. God always has the last word. Would you pray with me, please? God, we give you thanks for the new life that you give to us, the ways in which you cultivate that life in us, that you always have the last word. And so, God, we ask you to speak into our lives today. Call us by name. Let us know that you're still here, that you're alive, and that you bring life to everyone. In your name we pray. Amen. As we invite the ushers to come forward for the offering, I remind you that this is a way that you can bring life to the world, that by your gifts, your offerings, that we continue Jesus' ministry in this